All right, man, peace. So, former Boston Celtics legendary player and future Hall of Famer Paul Pierce recently caused a bit of a controversy when, in light of Kevin Durant scoring his 20,000th point, Paul Pierce alleged that KD is the most elite scorer in NBA history. When he says elite, meaning Paul Pierce believes that Kevin Durant can score in the most diverse fashion of any player in the history of the NBA. Of course, they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
All right, I want to get to KD on the other side of that game. Reached the 20,000-point mark last night. Only the second youngest in league history to do it behind LeBron James. You did have a lot to say about this. Y'all talking about NBA Countdown last night, so let's just show it. Here's what Paul had to say.
But I'm going to say one thing about Kevin. He is probably the most elite scorer in NBA history. When you look top to bottom, let's say guys like, you got Will Chamberlain, of course, did a lot of things inside, Carmelo, Jordan, mid-range inside, but KD shoots the three. He's elite in transition. He gets to the line. He can score inside.
So the best scorer in the history.
Here we go again.
Of the history.
Just the most dynamic scorer in the history.
I think what Paul Pierce really means is that KD can score in the most diverse ways of any player in NBA history, in his view. In his view. And when you think about it, his view or his perspective is certainly more credible than you might think offhand.
First of all, I love Paul how casually it's like, I mean, you got Will, Jordan, you didn't
No, I'm just saying the way he goes about it. I mean, of course, these people score more points probably on average, but when you look at his total package, you know, I mean, he's his closest thing. And you know what? I will throw Tracy McGrady in there also.
Yeah, because T-Mac really was KD before KD, except T-Mac was about 6 inches shorter than KD. Well, I shouldn't say 6 inches, more like 4 inches, because KD goes about 6'11", T-Mac was about 6'7".
These guys, they're 6'9", 6'11", can shoot the three, can finish on the break, can pass like magic. I mean, these guys can do it all. And KD's 7 feet. He's 7 feet tall. He can handle like a guard. I mean, tell me what player in NBA history at 7 feet. You know, you had Dirk who transcended the position.
Yeah, but the question isn't who is the best 7-footer. The question is...
But the way he does it at his size is unique and something we've never seen.
But MJ, Kobe...
Now,
I'm going to tell you what he has over there. The long ball.
That's what I'm saying. The three, that separates them.
But what separates them is their overall package in terms of they have post game. In between,
he has a post game.
Yeah, KD has a post game. He just doesn't use it a lot. He goes to his face up a little bit too much. But that's the style of the NBA today. That's why I've stated that I believe that the face up game in the NBA is greater than it's ever been, but it's taken away from the post game. Why? Because most of the players in the NBA today don't want to get involved in physicality if they don't have to. Now, a lot of people may not like this, but I think that Kevin Durant is definitely a greater scorer than Kobe Bryant was. Now, Kobe Bryant had he was much more of a volume shooter and scorer than Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant has had about 4 seasons where he shot over 50%. Kobe Bryant has never shot over 50% in one season. Kevin Durant averages more points per game than Kobe Bryant. Now, has Kevin ever averaged 35 a game in a season like Kobe Bryant has? No, he has not. But Kobe also shot 45% from the field that year. Now, when it comes to Wilt and Michael Jordan, of course, was a 30-point per game scorer over the course of his entire career. And that counts the last 2 seasons with the Washington Wizards, where he was 39 and 40 years old. LeBron James is a career 27 points per game scorer, but he's not the outside shooter that KD is. So, like I stated, I believe that Paul Pierce's statement bears a lot more credence than people might think offhand. When you sit down and you really have a chance to meditate on it, KD is 7 feet. He can break it down off the dribble. He can finish at the rim. He can shoot the three. He can post up, even though he does not do it with the frequency that he probably should or that he will later on in his career. And he's a great free throw shooter. So is he the most elite scorer of all time? It depends on how you define elite. Elite means upper crust. That right there, the list that we're looking at, is a list of the most elite scorers in the history of the NBA. They are the fastest to, or the youngest, I should say, according to this list, to get to 20,000 points. Now, of course, you'd also have to throw in guys like Rick Barry, George Gervin, Alex English, Bernard King. There were a lot of guys who came through the NBA who could straight fill it up. Certain fans from the early 2000s would, I'm sure, want to include Allen Iverson. But to me, Iverson was just way too much of a volume shooter to include him.
No, KD doesn't have post game.
Yes, he
like
does.
that. What KD wants to do? KD wants to get outside and shoot the jumper. He doesn't have that right there, man.
So if KD put you in the mid post and jabbed off,
How often does he go in there, though?
You can't block his shot.
No, you can't go in there. No, you can't block his shot, but how often is he in there? Most of his points is coming out on the perimeter.
He's in an offense to where he can't really demonstrate it. They don't want to slow it down, get it to the post. We don't even play that type of basketball no more. You know, they don't come to...
I agree with Paul when he said that. They don't play that type of basketball anymore. So it's very, very hard to determine. It's like comparing players from yesteryear in regards to saying that, well, they shoot a lower percentage of three or from three than the players today. Well, the three ball was not a primary shot back then, just like the post-up game is not primary today. So it's very hard to evaluate how good a post-up player a player is today, because players don't post up with the frequency that they did in yesteryear.
Come down, throw it in the post, and wait for you to make a move. You know, he's doing it in so many different ways. You know, these guys, Kobe, great scores, but what separates KD, he can do all the things they did, but his three ball is
okay. But
automatic.
here's one thing to throw into the conversation, though. Part of being a dynamic scorer and part of being a memorable scorer in the NBA is what you do in the biggest moments. I would say KD has had one super huge scoring moment where he hit that shot over LeBron, win the game in the NBA Finals, pretty much. That's fine, but he hasn't done it yet.
Right.
No, he's already done it. You just named it. Kevin Durant had one of the great finals performances in NBA history last year. His finals performance is in the class of many of Jordan's finals performances, with Dwayne Wade's finals performance in 2006, with Hakeem Olajuwon's finals performance in 1995. Those are the elite finals performances when you think of them. Shaquille O'Neal's finals performances in the early 2000s. Those are the top finals performances that I can think of in the last 25 plus years. Okay. Kobe's 2009 finals performance against Orlando, that's up there. I wouldn't quite put it in that class, but it's definitely up there. But yeah, those are definitely the best. I would say the best finals performance that I've seen in the since I've been watching basketball is probably Jordan's finals performance against Phoenix in '93, when he averaged 42 a game over 6 games.
Right.
And how many iconic shots does Michael Jordan have?
Yeah.
Even Kobe as
Well, we're
Jason
talking about
mentioned.
one shot. I'm just talking about as far as
I know, but
overall
I think when
talent
you're talking
and
about
dynamic
He's in the
dynamic scorer
conversation.
in the NBA.
He's in the
He's
conversation,
100%
for
in
sure.
the conversation, 100%. And I think you're right. He's going to have more of those. But being great in the NBA is not about what you do, but when you do it.
But that's not the conversation. The conversation is not how great he is. The conversation is about him being an elite scorer. What Paul's talking about is KD's the variety of his shots, the diversity in which he's able to score the basketball. He's not going by track record, because if that's the case, George Gervin is not one of the elite scorers by the criteria that Rachel Nichols is trying to establish, because he never even got to the finals.
I'll go as far as saying he might be top 5. He might break top 5 in scoring.
Oh, he's no doubt going to break top 5. He's going to be a 30,000 point scorer.
Yeah, he'll break 30,000, but he's not going to break Kareem.
I mean, think about the guys are all at the top 5. Who shoots the ball like KD? None of them. Jordan, Kobe, Malone, Kareem. Right. None of them can shoot the ball like him. And
I agree.
And he's a 7-footer, putting it on the ground, playing like a point guard. Nobody, like Kobe is similar to Jordan. Kareem is similar to Shaq. I mean, these guys did it how they did it inside. But who can we say in that top 5 list? I mean, they did it on the inside. I'm saying at the center position. Who can we say on that top 5 list scores the way he does?
Well, I would say T-Mac, George Gervin, a little bit of Larry Bird. Kevin Durant was even on record as saying that he watched a lot of Larry Bird footage to add to his game. There's a lot of Nowitzki as well in Durant's game.
We're gonna keep, we're gonna keep talking about this all through the commercial break. So we're also gonna be talking.
Very interesting points made by Paul Pierce, though. I give him a lot of credit for even putting that point out there. Okay, so now Paul Pierce is going to keep his idea that KD is the most elite scorer in NBA history going. He's going to bring it forth before Michelle Beadle, the resident ESPN cokehead hoe, allegedly, as well as Jalen Rose and Chauncey Billups. Let's see what he has to say.
Once again, Twitter responded to you this time on Wednesday when you said KD is the most elite scorer in NBA history.
Yes.
Do you agree with Paul?
I understand where you're coming from. He is in the conversation. It's not so very far-fetched. But you don't have to be the first guy to rush to the hot take.
I mean, I kind of love it.
He's not there just yet. This is his 11th season. Okay, and when you say dynamic, I have to go to big numbers because we're talking about all-time greats. KD, in his career, he's won 4 scoring titles.
4? That's a lot.
4 scoring titles.
You know what's funny about a KD? If KD had played in the 80s, a lot of these basketball fans today would say KD couldn't play today. He's too skinny.
Michael Jordan has won 10.
There you go.
Okay? His career high is 32. Wilt's career high is 50.
That's insane.
KD.
I'm trying to figure out what Jalen is talking about when he says that Jordan's career high is 32. Jordan's career high is not 32. Let me rewind it back.
KD's. Wilt's career. He's won 4 scoring titles.
4? That's a lot.
4 scoring titles. Michael Jordan has won 10.
There you go.
Okay? His career high is 32. Wilt's career high is 50.
That's insane.
Well, maybe when he says his career high is 32, he's talking about Kevin Durant's career high points per game for a season. Because when he says Wilt's career high is 50, he's talking about Wilt's average for a season. So I'm going to assume that when he said he was not talking about Michael Jordan. He's talking about Kevin Durant. Because Michael Jordan's career high points per game for a season was 37.
KD's career high in a game is 54. Okay? My point is he a terrific scorer? We're not talking about the best three-point shooter. We're not talking about who has the most championships.
Right.
Michael Jordan is the most dynamic scorer to ever play in the NBA. Must mention Kareem. Must mention Kobe. Must mention AI.
Okay.
KD is in the conversation.
All right, your turn, Chauncey. And I'll give my...
I appreciate that, Paul. Thank you very much. Paul, I like
Paul talking like he gonna hit him with the whammy after everybody finishes speaking.
where you going. And KD is a guy that we've never seen. We've just never seen a guy like this. 6'10", maybe even 6'11".
Argue they
can score all over the place.
Can actually.
We didn't say who's the tallest scorer.
And he's very dynamic, and he's in the conversation, but I think that he has a little ways to go. Let's just face it. Michael Jordan averaged 30 for a career. KD's done it twice in his career. But I hate to admit this, but I am a prisoner of the moment a little bit, because you got guys like Iceman, George Gervin, who I talk to a lot of legends, and they say he's the best scorer that they've seen in their era.
That's why I call KD Iceberg Slim. He's the remix of George.
You got guys, you also got guys like Elgin Baylor, who,
Yes, Elgin Baylor, by the way, until Michael Jordan averaged 37 a game in the 86-87 season, Elgin Baylor was the only other player other than Wilt Chamberlain to score that many points in a season or average that many points in a season. I believe that Elgin Baylor averaged 37 or 38 a game one season, or 36.8, something like that. You brothers can look it up.
it was an unbelievable score that are in these conversations. So I am a prisoner of the moment because I've seen KD play. I've played alongside him before in USA basketball, and then guys like MJ. I played with great scorers like Melo, who, are good scorers, but this guy is elite. I just can't give him that title.
Now, when I say elite, let's talk about the way he does it. Now, you got the great scorers you guys mentioned, Jordan, Will, Kobe. These guys are great scorers. They're probably going to have higher averages than KD. They're probably going to have more points in one game than KD. I mean, KD will probably never score 81. But when I say elite, and I go down the line of weaknesses and strengths, look at this graphic right here.
Oh my goodness!
This graphic remind me of that Dave Chappelle skit. Dialing. Every criteria that Paul Pierce could think of, he has KD as elite. And you can make the case that he's correct. I mean, other than post game, I can't give KD that elite level because he doesn't get down in the post enough.
Are y'all gonna do this?
This is good. Keep going, Paul.
We need to
Keep
put
going.
Lisa and Amina's pictures up
One
here.
thing he's not great at.
Apparently, he's elite
Now,
in everything.
let's say you put Jordan in this category. Jordan's elite in everything. Not free throws like KD.
Well, Jordan actually was a very, very good free throw shooter. I wouldn't say a great free throw shooter, but the thing that you would take away from Jordan as far as elite would be 3-point shooting, not free throws. Jordan for his career was somewhere around 83% as a free throw shooter.
Stop it.
Kobe's a great free throw shooter.
Stop it.
I mean, the one thing
Never
that
show this
separates
graphic
the one
again.
thing that separates him is his 3-point shooting from all the rest.
Well, let me
Correct.
tell you
This is
why.
the greatest graphic in the history of ESPN.
Let me tell you why. That's the one thing that
But he
separates
only plays in the 3-point era, right?
he Michael Jordan,
One
these
more
guys,
thing,
they
one
didn't
more
shoot
thing.
a lot of. The game was
He's not
different.
going to
P.
have the opportunity.
Absolutely. And that's what I try to explain to people who attempt to compare Michael Jordan's 3-point shooting to Kobe or even to LeBron. That era back in the 80s, they just didn't take that shot. Now, people will say, well, whose fault is that or who cares? That's understandable. But at the same time, when you're trying to compare players, you always have to factor in the era that they played in. That's like someone saying that, well, Steph Curry is a better shooter than Jerry West because Steph Curry made more 3-point shots. Well, Jerry West didn't have the 3-point shot when he played. So it's very difficult to determine who actually was a better shooter. But what Steph Curry does prove is that Jerry West could dominate today if he played today. As I've stated numerous times, great players will dominate in any era because they would adapt. And the thing about great players that they all have in common is they have great drive and the will to excel. So I have no doubt in my mind that if Elgin Baylor and Jerry West played today, they would dominate today. If Steph Curry played back in the 60s, he would dominate the 60s. I'm not one of these guys, Larry Bird couldn't play today and LeBron James couldn't play back in the 80s. All that stuff is nonsense.
Opportunities that Kobe scored 60 in his last game. He scored 80 in a game. He's not going to have the opportunity to have his own team. I'm not comparing him to Kobe. Kobe is greater than Durant. I'm not.
Yeah, as an overall player, when you count the mental game, Kobe is above Durant right now. But in 10 years and 3 or 4 more championships and maybe 2 or 3 more finals MVPs, KD may crack the top 10. But you know what? I'll probably be doing a video on that.
I'm not comparing the two. So don't. You people were looking. I'm not comparing.
Tweet at him.
So the way he goes by, see, he had a team with Westbrook. He couldn't go out there and just go for 60, 70 games. But the year he won MVP, Westbrook missed 27 games. He averaged 35 points.
Well, no, not 35. More likely somewhere around 32, like Jalen stated.
Now, you're telling me if Westbrook missed the whole season, he probably would average close to 36, 37 a night for an entire season. We've seen guys like Tracy McGrady have his own team. No other All-Stars go for 60-point games. It's very dynamic. He's not going to have that opportunity because he's played with Westbrook and Curry, so he can't just go out there for a whole season.
So let me
He
hold.
shows that.
No
Preach
doubt.
for me.
No
So
doubt.
you mean the most elite scorer doesn't have an opportunity because his teammates are getting in his way?
Well, I don't think that that's an excuse. I think that that is a reason. When you're playing with a player like Westbrook, he is going to dominate the ball. Everyone knows that Westbrook has an alpha personality, almost to the point of being a sociopath. And that's why I think that KD was wise to leave Oklahoma City, because that team was not going to go anywhere. They were going to continuously go to the Western Conference Finals, maybe 1 year breakthrough to the finals if Golden State had suffered a serious injury. And they were going to lose in a big spot because neither KD nor Russell Westbrook were properly coached enough to teach them on how to play winning basketball and how to complement each other as opposed to just playing my turn, your turn. And then you have a guy like a Westbrook who's not a real point guard playing the point. Westbrook is just a freakish athlete. He's a once-in-a-generation athlete. But is he a great point guard? No, he's not.
Listen, he has two 20-point scorers on his team, and he scores 25 a game.
They were there when he decided to join the team.
What other players do you know in NBA history has three 20-point scorers?
Well, I believe that the Denver Nuggets did it back in the 80s with Kiki Vandeweghe and Alex English and one of their other players. There were a few teams where guys averaged over 20 a game when it was more than that it was three guys.
Now, to average 25
Denver Nuggets did it.
26 points.
Yep, Jalen just said it, Denver Nuggets.
Points with two other
Run
20-point
TMC
scorers on your team.
Yes, Run TMC did it with Tim Hardaway and Chris Mullin and Mitch Richmond. And I believe that the Lakers did it also in 86, either 86, 87 or 87, 88. I believe that they had three guys with over 20. I think that Magic, Worthy, and Byron Scott all average over 20 a game one of those seasons.
Your team. That's tough to do.
Can we put that graphic back up? I want to make sure you guys saw it.
Don't ever put that
No,
graphic
put that graphic back up. It was a great graphic. Thank you. You guys, why are you arguing with Paul?
I'm also trying to think if the Seattle Supersonics also did it with Tom Chambers and Xavier McDaniel and Dale Ellis. Maybe also in the 86-87 season.
Look at the graphic.
Where's the argument at? Right here.
Look
Let's
at
go
the
down
graphic.
the list.
But look,
Where's the argument?
It said it doesn't.
Where's the argument?
It
We're
doesn't.
talking about score.
It
Catch
doesn't
and shoot.
There's no
Clutch.
argument, Paul.
Finish at the rim. ISO.
I can
Off the
tell
dribble.
you one thing on there that I don't agree with.
What?
He's not an elite post scorer. We don't see him go to the post. He goes to the
I
mid
had an
post.
opportunity.
He could be an elite post scorer. He just doesn't go there enough. And I actually think that in order for him to step his game up in regards to the playoffs, he is going to have to play more in the post. Because that's where they need him. They don't need him out there shooting threes. That's where Steph and Klay should be. In order for KD to truly be the most effective for their team, particularly in the playoffs, mid-post, high post is where he should be. That's where they need him to work out of.
Opportunity to guard this
He
guy.
goes to the mid post.
Listen, he gets it done
We-
anywhere on the court.
We're not saying who's the most complete scorer. We're not saying who's the tallest scorer, who's the best three-point shooter. You said the most elite. And KD scored in 11 years, he's had 4 50-point games. 4 of them. Wilt
Second
Chamberlain,
youngest to 20,000.
okay, to LeBron James, who still plays in the league too.
Yep.
Right.
Let me say this, and Jalen's trying to harp on the fact that KD does not have too many 50-point games. That's also a reflection on the fact that KD takes very good shots. His shot selection has always been very good. When you look at the fact that he's had multiple 50% shooting seasons with OKC, shows you how proficient he is in his shooting and the level of sagacity that he has in his shot selection. He doesn't take wild, crazy shots. And playing in a one-on-one offensive system like he was playing in OKC, for him to average or for him to shoot over 50% multiple times in that offense shows you his discernment in the types of shots that he takes. That's once again why he fit in so well with the Golden State Warriors.
By the way, who can score the ball too? Wilt Chamberlain has scored over 50 118 times. Michael Jordan has done it 31 times.
No
Kobe Bean Bryant has done it 25 times. How
I'm
about
just saying the way he goes about it, the way he goes about scoring,
LeBron?
there's no weaknesses
Say that.
in his offensive game.
And let me say this. Wilt Chamberlain, of course, we all know that he's like the Babe Ruth of the NBA. When you look at the record books, most of the record books belong to Wilt Chamberlain. But he also played in an era where the defensive schemes were not as they were not as developed as they are today. The athletes back then are definitely underrated. People today just seem to think that it was a bunch of bums playing back then. You did have a lot of great centers in that era as well. You had people like Nate Thurman, who a lot of brothers allege is LeBron James' dad, who was an all-time great athlete and center playing in that era. You had, of course, the great Bill Russell, who even though he was only 6'9.5", was a phenomenal athlete and could have probably been a decathlete world champion or a gold medalist had he chosen to be. But Wilt Chamberlain is a freakish athlete. Wilt Chamberlain is probably the greatest athlete of the 20th century, no matter the sport. I mean, Wilt Chamberlain is a guy who sets track and field records, like in the shot put and the discus and the high jump, things like that. Like, he was just a freakish athlete. Now, when it comes to Kobe, yeah, Kobe scored over 50 25 times, but how many of those games where he scored over 50 did he shoot 50% from the field? Kobe probably has the most games scoring over 50, shooting under 50% from the field for that game of any player in NBA history. Most players who score over 50 in a game, they do it because they're hot. Kobe scored over 50 a lot of games because he just shot so many shots.
Is it just early? Is Paul just early?
It's elite.
Is that all this is?
That's elite right there. Getting in front of the hot take.
It's just a little early. Maybe that's it.
AI scored 50 11
I thought I was
times.
talking to guys that knew basketball.
What if AI played in this era? When you couldn't touch a guy.
AI will
and it's
average
fast?
45 in this era.
Well, in this era, AI, it'd be very, very difficult to guard him because everything is about facing up, and that was AI's game. And then you're also talking about an era where there's no 4-man and 5-man waiting for you at the basket. So AI would definitely lead the league in scoring with no problem in this era. Probably average about 34, 35 a game.
All right, we're moving on.
But anyway, this was a very good segment. Kudos to Paul Pierce for having the courage to put forth a theory like that. I definitely think that he's a bit early, but I also believe that by the time KD's career is over, he'll probably be considered the most diversified scorer in NBA history. But anyway, peace.